Now, once again, we have the Rise of Skywalker leaks to talk about. This time, though, it's more details about what supposedly happened behind the scenes during production, especially in regards to what J.J. Abrams had to deal with from Disney, as well as descriptions of some of the scenes cut from the movie. And normally, it might be easy to overlook all this and more or less dismiss it as almost wishful thinking that a much longer and likely better cut of the film exists, or to look at all these leaks and rumors and say, they're almost certainly coming from someone or made up by someone who doesn't like Disney Star Wars and wants to get fans worked up, which it's done. A lot of fans right now are up in arms and they want this supposed cut of the film released. Anyway, normally I do think this would be just dismissed by most, including myself, as wild rumors, if not for all the plot leaks that came out before the film did, leaks that turned out to be almost 100% true or accurate, which means clearly somebody in the know or with access to the film was leaking information. That is just a fact. And so it doesn't feel all that impossible to now have someone else, or even the same person, I suppose, spilling even more details about the movie. This time, though, the individual seems to personally know J.J. Abrams on some level, and is essentially giving us J.J.'s perspective on many things, or what he had to deal with. And with how upset these rumors say J.J. is about how the movie turned out, and the hoops he had to jump through along the way, which I'll get to in a moment, maybe someone who knows J.J. or someone who respects him is trying to defend him, who knows. All I do know is that some very interesting claims are made, and I'll now go over most of them and give my own thoughts for what it's worth. And mostly here, I'll be talking about what supposedly happened behind the scenes, not so much what scenes were cut from the film, though I may touch on them briefly at the end. I may also go over those in greater detail in a separate video if people are interested in that. Okay, so first of all here, the source claims that there is an agenda against J.J. Abrams, that basically Disney doesn't want him to become a part of the DCEU because they see it as a potential threat to the MCU should they ever get their stuff together over there at DC. And since JJ has arguably done a good job of resurrecting franchises like Star Wars and Star Trek, they fear he could now somehow do the same for DC. Furthermore, Disney was in the bidding for Bad Robot, that's J.J. Abrams' production company, simply to stop Warner Brothers from purchasing it, and if you don't know, Warner Brothers has the rights to DC. Now, I guess this all sounds somewhat possible that Disney would want to stop Warner Brothers from being able to attach J.J. Abrams' name to future DC projects, since at this point he is very well known even among more casual fans and average moviegoers. And considering a lot of people who fall into those categories, the non-hardcore fan categories, really seem to enjoy both The Force Awakens and The Rise of Skywalker, well, Warner Brothers basically relaunching the DCEU with JJ's name attached to it might draw some serious interest from those people, or people who otherwise just wouldn't care about it anymore. So I guess the question then becomes, how much of a threat does Disney really think a proper DCEU could pose to the now very well established MCU? Well, considering Marvel is now moving away from some of their core and most beloved characters like Iron Man and Steve Rogers' Captain America, and DC could again come out with Batman and Superman, two of the biggest names in comic books period, maybe they are afraid that if those characters are done right this time around, DC could start to take the spotlight away from Marvel. Either way though, I have a hard time believing that Disney would go through so much trouble to ruin J.J. Abrams in a manner of speaking, or that they really fear the DCEU that damn much at this point. Even if things really do start to turn around for DC, it's going to take them years to put together anything even close to what Marvel has already done to amass the same type of following. Plus, just getting J.J. Abrams does not mean that the DCEU would actually finally be good or get its act together. Sure, it may initially attract some big-time interest from people thanks to the name, but if the movies still aren't good, they're not going to stick around. Not to mention, there are certainly other people who are out there who could bring new life to DC and turn things around for them besides J.J. Abrams. From everything I've ever heard, the problem with DC has been too much tampering from Warner Brothers executives, and until that changes, I don't think anyone can take DC and turn it into a threat to Marvel. And speaking of too much tampering from overlords who own a property but don't understand it and then make a mess of things, apparently Disney changed many things about The Rise of Skywalker as time went by, without the knowledge or approval of J.J. Abrams. Apparently when J.J. saw the final cut of the film, the actual theatrical release, he was very disappointed and felt devastated and blindsided, because he didn't know they had re-edited it once again after a slightly longer cut they'd all agreed on. Also, it was Bob Iger, the CEO of Disney, who decided to bring J.J. Abrams back for Episode 9, not Kathleen Kennedy, and that Iger also wanted a more fan service approach to the film. Now, none of this sounds too impossible at all, that Disney, on their own, took what JJ had done and tried to craft what they thought was the best, safest version of the film that they hoped most fans would enjoy. And I fully believe that no matter who actually hired J.J. Abrams, that Bob Iger and other top dogs at Disney told him to make a movie that would please the fans, not divide them any further than they already were after The Last Jedi. And say what you will about the Rise of Skywalker that we actually got, but it does feel like a movie that tries to make a lot of different types of fans happy. But you know what they say, when you try to please everyone, you usually end up pleasing no one. Anyway, apparently JJ was promised more creative freedom this time, more than what he was given with The Force Awakens, which is part of the reason he came back and why he was so upset that they were meddling with the movie so much. According to the source, JJ himself even said changes were being done by people who had no business meddling with creators. And this, again, doesn't sound impossible, that Disney was trying to overanalyze the film and what would and wouldn't work, and what would somehow please the most amount of fans. In fact, if you asked me what I thought the biggest problem with the sequel trilogy was, I'd say it was a lack of planning and having multiple different writers and creators work on it. However, perhaps just as big of a mistake was that it was never about telling a story or telling the best possible story for Disney. It was always about engineering a trilogy that would make the most possible money, period. Whether these leaks are true or not, I guarantee you behind the scenes, most decisions that were made regarding this trilogy were based on how much money could potentially be made, not if it made for a great story. A character like Captain Phasma is the perfect example of this. She was a huge part of the marketing campaign leading up to The Force Awakens, but had a very limited role in the film and could have easily been edited out and very little changes. Clearly, the idea was to make another Boba Fett type character that the fan base would fall in love with and then they'd want to run out and buy all her merchandise. But she was so terribly handled in the films that no one took her seriously, and no one really cares about her now. Next up here, apparently J.J. Abrams wanted Episode 9 to be broken up into 2 parts, but Disney said no. He then was content with being allowed to make a 3-hour movie, and the supposed J.J. cut of the film that so many are now demanding did end up at 3 hours and 2 minutes long, the exact same runtime as Endgame, oddly enough. In December then, weeks before the release of the film, JJ agreed to a cut of the film that was 2 hours and 37 minutes long, but the one we ultimately got in the theater was only 2 hours and 22 minutes long. And it was this cut of the film that, as mentioned before, JJ felt blindsided by and was disappointed with, because he didn't know it had been edited further from the agreed upon 2 hour and 37 minute version. Now, first of all, do I think there's a good chance that the very first cut of the film was over 3 hours long? Well, absolutely. In fact, I wouldn't be stunned if there was quite a bit left out of even that cut of the film, especially if it's true that JJ initially wanted 2 movies to tell this story with. And you need only watch the film that we actually got, and the crazy pace it goes at, to realize there was almost undoubtedly some serious editing done to fit it into a 2 hour and 22 minute time frame. And after having now seen it, I have no idea why they didn't go with a longer cut of the film, why they thought 2 hours and 22 minutes was the perfect length. There's probably someone at Disney who came up with an equation for what the perfect runtime of this film should be, and that's the number it spit out, and that's the number they went with, story be damned. But even giving us the version of the film that supposedly JJ agreed to in early December, the 2 hour and 37 minute version, would have been good, I figure. Because even 15 extra minutes would have likely helped quite a bit with some of the pacing issues, and I can't imagine it would have felt that long to get 15 more minutes. Hell, The Last Jedi was 2 hours and 33 minutes long, and though it had its problems, runtime wasn't necessarily one of them. So basically, there probably is or was a 3-hour initial cut of the film, especially considering what the movie is or turned out to be. There's almost no way a lot of scenes or footage weren't cut out to turn it into this 2 hour and 22 minute crazy paced mess we got. Now, how good or polished that 3-hour cut may have been is a curious question, but personally, I'd take a film that drags at a couple points as long as it gives us some solid character development in that time, over one that moves so quickly you never get a chance to take a breath before something new is being thrown right in your face. Especially when you consider this movie was the end of the Skywalker saga, that pretty much any and every Star Wars fan, or even an average moviegoer, would have understood and forgiven it if it ran a bit long. Again, Endgame clocked in at a little over 3 hours, and I didn't hear many complaints about that. Let's also not forget about the 3-hour and 48-minute runtime of Return of the King. In other words, when wrapping up a truly epic story, most moviegoers are going to understand and accept it running a bit long. And after 42 years of build-up, the end of the Skywalker saga had earned and deserved as long of an ending as necessary. Okay, and finally here, apparently one of the scenes that was removed from the movie or changed was the ending of the film that would have melted our minds, which I'm assuming is the one Kevin Smith was referring to with his comments several months back now, before the ending would have been changed by Disney, that is. And that is that all of the Force Ghosts and a few others like Mace Windu would have shown up at the end during the final battle with Palpatine and created a type of barrier between him and Rey. And though I don't know if that scene would have melted my mind per se, considering I was hoping and expecting to see all the Force Ghosts at the end of the movie, I can tell you that the ending that we did get certainly did not melt my mind, or at least it didn't melt it in a good way. Oh, and according to the source, the "they fly now" scene that so many fans rolled their eyes at was J.J. Abrams' least favorite scene in the movie, and he didn't even want it in there. It was basically in there just to sell merchandise, as were other scenes that weren't specified. Which I guess means kids were supposed to watch that and want their parents to run out and buy them flying stormtrooper action figures or something like that. And yeah, I certainly don't doubt some things are put in there just to try and sell some toys or other merchandise, like I was talking about earlier with Captain Phasma, in fact. And considering the "they fly now" clip was the very first full clip of the movie they showed us, I wouldn't be surprised at all if that had been done in the hopes of really just getting kids excited about flying stormtroopers, even though I don't think many kids even care about Star Wars action figures these days, even those who really do love Star Wars. In closing here, I don't think any of this sounds impossible, mainly because previous leaks turned out to be so accurate. And if a 3-hour J.J. Abrams cut of the film does exist, or could be assembled if it doesn't, I'd be all for that. As I said in my review of the film, there is something there that could have worked, but it all feels so rushed, and when it ends, you're not even entirely sure what the stakes are or were, or why you should even care. But if you put another 40 minutes into this film, maybe, just maybe, you might have something. Well, that's all I've got for you this time. Now it's your turn to weigh in on this one. Do you believe the leaks or not? Would you want them to release a 3-hour cut of the film, or would you just not even care? Whatever the case may be, leave a comment below and let's talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thanks for watching.